Hi everybody, Michael here from Flesh to the Father. Today I want to discuss the true meaning of Noah's Ark and the darkness that encompasses our world in these current times, as we've recently seen with the murder of Charlie Kirk and many other things that are happening. So let's go. Okay, so I'm just going to have a bit of a ramble really, because I haven't done a video for a while. And one thing I've noticed recently is that the world really is in darkness. And this will all tie into the true meaning of a Noah's Ark. But if you look at the world at the moment, there is an incredible amount of hate pushed by the three evils, or three of the biggest evils, which is the liberal communism, Islamism and Islam. And what we're also seeing is the rise of National Socialism as well. That's the third danger that is coming into view. And we're entering a similar period of the 1930s where the same scenario is being repeated and people are making the same mistakes. And as we saw with the murder of Charlie Kirk yesterday, a lot of sensible right-wing people, or a lot of people are coming out saying the answer, we need to turn more far right. And there are people actually promoting National Socialism. And you see a rise in the defense of the stuff that the Nazis did in World War II, which is ridiculous. And you see the amount of theories about the Jews, which are not based in any truth. They're based on false conspiracies that have been around the whole of this age, really, for the last 2,000 years. And with that, the world is filled with hate. And there's no sensible people or real people of God sorting the problems out or being a shining light in the world. And when there is no shining light in the world, then dark things are going to happen. And there are a few small voices of light in the world, but they will be ignored because social media and all that stuff promotes all the clowns, and it just leads to hate. And just some examples of what I've seen this week from the leftist side. I saw a video of Jesse Lee Peterson. Most people probably know him, but he's a black conservative man of God in America. And he was just going around the black community in California celebrating what he jokingly does is White History Month, but there is meaning behind what he's talking about. He's basically speaking out against all the anti-white rhetoric. And all the black people he goes up to, 95% of them are basically unhinged hatred of white people. Yeah, he says to them, do you love white people? And they're like, no, I don't love white people. Even a woman said, I'm a Christian. He says, do you love white people? She's like, no, I don't love white people, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, how can you be a Christian and say you don't love white people? And they've essentially just been brainwashed by a leftist ideology to believe that white people are evil. And that manifests in disgusting ways, such as in the UK, Axel Rudikabana. He was a psycho, but obviously some of the stuff he was studying was anti-white rhetoric, a lot of it pushed in universities. And you also saw the gentleman a few days ago who murdered the white Ukrainian woman and was saying, I got that white woman. So it's clearly racial prejudice. And it's very, very dark and demonic. It is just irrational hatred. And then you go on to Islam as well. We see the same irrational hatred. And Charlie Kirk was also criticizing Islam this week. And it wouldn't surprise me if the person who took him out would have either been an Islamist or a communist, one or the other. But we've seen the Islamists, what they've been doing for the past 20 years, since September 11, since 7/7 in the UK. We see grooming gangs. We see them all over the West saying that they're going to take over, that they want global jihad. We saw what Hamas did. And whatever you believe about that conflict, they want the same for all of Western countries. So today is 9/11. If you go onto YouTube or X and look at the Palestinians celebrating 9/11, you'll just see them in the streets celebrating the death of Westerners. And that's their ideology. They want to take out Israel first, and then they're going to come for the West, because it's not about land. It's about a sick ideology that believes that Islam deserves to rule the world. And unless people turn to Islam, then they're non-human and they deserve to be wiped out. That's their theology. And the third evil ideology, which is massively on the rise, is the National Socialism, the extreme right-wing politics. And the irony is, most sensible people, like a Charlie Wright, he is a sensible conservative Christian. He gets labelled far right, despite the fact that he's obviously not far right. He's a sensible conservative Christian. But what we are seeing is the rise of the actual far right. You see people defending Hitler. You see people like Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Kanye West. All these people, even Tucker Carlson, sort of saying, well, World War II, was the narrative right? And, was Hitler right? And all this stuff, which is a load of rubbish. They don't know what they're talking about. Anybody who can defend what the National Socialists did, they haven't done their research and understand what it's all about. And I'm seeing it in circles. Obviously, I'm from the UK, but in the UK and America, a lot of people who are fed up with all the migration, they've turned that into the narrative that, somehow Hitler was correct and that Europe needs to be an ethno-state and all this stuff. And then you'll see an irrational hatred of non-white people. So in the UK, I'm a sensible person who wants to deport all illegal immigrants and all nefarious migrants who are coming in here who don't want to assimilate and who hate the West, such as pretty much most of the Muslims who believe that Sharia law should be implemented in England. They need to go, no problem. And then we keep a sensible percentage of good migrants who have assimilated, who love England. And while they're not ethnically English, obviously, they're still a part of our country and are welcome here. Yeah, that's a sensible solution. But there are people who are literally taking the extremist Nazi socialist position that every single non-foreigner, even mixed race people, need to be deported and England needs to be a white ethno-state. But that is not the answer, because our answer, we're not in a racial war, we're in a spiritual war. And as you can see, if you looked at those pictures of, I said, of Jesse Lee Peterson talking to all those black people, you would think it is a race war. But then when you see, I saw shortly after another video on a college campus, actually, after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, going up to white students, leftist white students, saying, oh, Charlie Kirk's been killed. What do you think of that? The exact same hatred the black people showed to whites, these white people were showing towards Charlie Kirk. They were saying disgusting things like, I don't care, I'm glad. And they're just saying it outright in the open. And again, it's obviously not racist. It's the ideology that they follow. So it's not a race war, blacks and whites. It's the ideology that the communists and Marxists are using to turn black people against whites. In the same way that they're turning youth against Charlie Kirk, so young liberals against young conservatives. It's not a race problem, it's an ideology problem. And we can't win if we focus on race and shallow concepts. We need to focus on the ideologies, and the only way we can overcome it is with the spirit. So if you can see what I'm talking about, there is darkness, and all the countries of the world, there's no sensible heads. Donald Trump is reasonably sensible, I would say, but if you look at the main powers that be, you have the European Union, who are corrupt. You have Russia and China, who are dangerous organizations. I know some people like to make out that Russia aren't that bad, but Russia are allying with Iran, and Iran's leaders are extremist Muslims, and they're also allying with other nefarious groups. So the idea that Russia is somehow not that bad is ridiculous. And I believe that Russia and China, a lot of these people are feeding bots into Western nations to divide us. Because if you go online, on Twitter and YouTube, all the comments, these extremist comments, they're never by people. They're always by like fake accounts. And they'll always be sort of saying the same nefarious stuff that doesn't seem like a normal person would say. So I think a lot of them are bots to cause division between Western people. Because as I said, the blacks and whites in America and the students, left and right students, conservative and liberal students who used to get along, they're being divided, a lot of it by these fake bot accounts, which I believe are coming from nefarious people. I would say whether it's Russia, whether it's China, whether it's Islamists, they're doing it to divide us. And we need to unite, but we need to unite in the spirit. We can't unite as leftists and rightists because that's worldly concepts, but we can unite in the spirit. That's why I've been thinking of solutions, and that's the reason I've not been posting much, is because I'm trying to come up with solutions. I'm not interested in YouTube channels to make money or grift or anything. I'm trying to figure out solutions. And I think one thing is we need to start a movement where people forget politics and say we're not going to get involved with politics. We want to focus on the spirit and of uniting in the spirit above politics. So the battle is not left or right. We need to transcend left and right and move upwards towards the spirit and towards God, and that will heal our lands and our people. And with all that being said, I want to explain now the true meaning of Noah's Ark. And if you follow my channel, you'll understand that I believe that a lot of the Bible is not to be taken literally. They're spiritual analogies. And once you have good spiritual wisdom and understanding, you can make sense of the Bible story. So for an example, Jesus didn't heal the literal physically blind, they were spiritually blind. And Jesus didn't walk on water is a metaphor for having faith. And Jesus didn't bring Lazarus back from the death after 3 days. That was a story about him being spiritually dead and obviously in darkness and depression. And when Christ came, he used his spirit to awaken him and bring him back from spiritual death. And Jesus' resurrection is not, he didn't literally physically raise from the dead. It was an analogy of his spirit raising from the dead. And that resurrection really means being born again as a spirit. You move away from the flesh and you're resurrected back to the spirit. And that's what we need to do as a collective humanity. Once we all collectively return to Christ, are born in Christ, we rise towards the spirit, to the Father, and we can win the spiritual battle. We won't win it in the physical, we'll win it in the spirit. And the true meaning of Noah's Ark is as follows. I was actually listening to a song. It's a Christian song, and it's called Little Flowers. And the premise of the song is that the little flowers appreciate the rain, because without the rain, it can't grow. So it has rain, and then the sun comes along, and through that process, it can grow. And it's an analogy for us as humans is that when you're going through dark times, don't feel bad, because it's helping you to grow. And it is a spot on analogy. And I think the end lyrics are, if it never rains, we'll never ever grow. And I was thinking, yes, that's very true. But as I was thinking it's true when the sun comes along, but what happens when there is pure darkness? Like in our current world, there's pure darkness, it's more of a flood. And whilst a little bit of rain helps the flower to grow, if there's a flood, or if there's too much rain over and over and there's no sun, like in the middle of winter, the flowers will die. And that's what I believe we are at now as a collective human race, is that there's so much evil and darkness in the world and there's no light, that a little bit of rain is good. But when there's a flood, the balance is out of whack and death and destruction will come. So if you've got a world of a little bit of evil and a lot of good, or a mix of evil and good will always win out, and it will help people grow, and there's a perfect balance. But right now we're consumed with evil and darkness in our world, and it is a flood, and there's going to be a lot of dark times and death and destruction coming up, in my opinion. And that's when I realized, that's when I realized I have no fear, because I understand I have the spiritual truth. I'm born again in the Spirit of God, and I have no fear. I've read the New Testament, I understand it correctly. I've read the Bhagavad Gita, and they all say, have no fear, don't fear the flesh, death of the flesh, be born again in the Spirit, and you're safe from all the troubles of the world, in terms of you have a spiritual higher understanding. And that's when I realized that is the ark. That is the meaning of the Noah's Ark. And I kind of feel like I am, in a way, and many others like me who are awake are like Noah, warning that people need to return to God. So the ark represents returning to God. Because what I'm saying now, our world is in darkness. I believe we're going to have a lot of difficult times, such as we could have World War III. We could have civil wars. We're going to likely have a financial collapse in the next few years. And there's going to be a lot of darkness and trouble in the world. But the good news is, if you return to God, you'll be able to overcome it, and you'll be on the ark to save you from getting drowned in the world. So the message really is, wake up, be born again, return to the Spirit, and return to the Father. That's basically how you return to the ark. So if you've returned to the ark and you're awake and you're born again of the Spirit, you have no fear of death, so you won't live in any fear. You'll understand that there's going to be a financial collapse, so you'll prepare. You'll understand that there's brainwashing leftists and Islamists out there, so you won't send your children to university. If you're 16, 17, 18, you won't go to university, waste money getting brainwashed. If you understand that there's a lot of evil in the world, you'll be sensible when you go out. You won't have any fear, but you're not going to put yourself in situations where you're going to be in danger. Such as that Ukrainian woman, if she was truly awake, she wouldn't have put herself in such a position. And the same with COVID. Those who are awake wouldn't have took the slightly dangerous medical procedures because we knew that it was about money and power rather than people's health. And if the governments try to introduce digital IDs, the smart people who are awake won't be taking them, and they'll push back and they'll fight for righteousness. Whereas all those who are blind and are ignorant, they're going to fall into the darkness. So some naive kid who goes to university and gets brainwashed to be a leftist, like all those students I spoke of earlier, they're going to get caught in the world and fall into darkness. But we need to warn people, bring them to God and bring them to the light. And it can't be done by simply becoming a Christian. That's not good enough to be a Christian. You need to truly understand what Christ meant and be born again of the Spirit. Okay, so I think I've made my point of this video, and I want to finish the video, as I always like to do, is to focus on some positivity and solutions. YouTube and social media, all they want to do is complain about the problems, monetize their content, and this is the reason why the world's in darkness, because nobody provides some solutions and people aren't interested in solutions. But if you're listening to this, then obviously you are, and you're the people who are getting onto the ark. So some positivity and solutions. Whilst we are in darkness, the Bible, the Gita, all the top teachings say to never live in fear. And do not fear death of the flesh, return to the spirit. And I'd advise you to read the Bhagavad Gita, one of the best texts, because it teaches you all about the spiritual truth. And also, I would recommend reading the Gita first and then going through and reading the New Testament again. And then you'll understand it from a spiritual point of view. And you'll see the similarities and you'll sort of see what was meant to be said in the Bible by reading the Gita. So that's one good way of doing it. And also you can do it within yourself. The best way is to meditate and to fast. And that's how you will awaken the spirit within yourself. That's the most important thing. So you can awaken it within yourself through meditation and fasting. And you can also, at the same time, intellectually understand spiritual truth in a way by listening to people who are already awake and reading real spiritual truth from the likes of the Gita and a lot of Hindu spiritual masters, Buddhist spiritual masters. And if you're going to go into Christians, I do think Christianity is mostly correct, but you have to look at it from a mystical point of view. So follow people like myself, or if you study Christianity, study it from the mystics. So look up Christian mystics and see what they have to say. Read articles by them, and it will make more sense than just some stupid pastor who just reads a book and doesn't understand the spiritual wisdom behind all the teachings. Okay, and other solutions is, I suggest, is always have an open mind. Whenever you study any topic, there's so many mad theories out there. Just study both sides and never become an ideologue. Never fall to any ideology. If you just look at any subject, always look at both sides. So whatever it is, Israel, Palestine, look at both sides' point of views. Whether it's liberalism, communism against conservatism, look at both sides and try to look up sensible. Whether you're looking at Judaism, Christianity, Islam, study all the religions and build your own picture and try to listen to sensible voices. Listen to sensible rabbis, Orthodox Christians. Don't listen to some leftist liberal Jewish rabbi who owns some nefarious company who doesn't represent real Judaism. Don't listen to some Church of England pastor who is in the LGBT, because obviously that's not a real representative of Christianity. And try to listen to sensible Muslims. Even though I think the religion itself is completely dangerous, there are some sensible Muslims in places like the UAE, rather than these radical ones that have infiltrated the West and are like the Muslim Brotherhood touch, because obviously they're the extremists. But if you want sensible Muslims, I'd suggest someone like Imam Tawhidi. I think there's some guy called Amji Tahar or something on X. He's basically from the UAE, and they are the sensible Muslims that you can listen to. And don't become radicalized. As I said earlier, don't fall for hating people based on race, especially if you're black towards a white. That seems a big problem that the elites are using. And in turn, whites shouldn't fall for overcoming evil with evil by hating them back. No, we overcome evil with good. And that's by representing Christ and the Spirit. And make no mistake, we fight back against evil, but to overcome it, we have to do it with good. We can fight back against it, but we overcome it with good. And don't fall for all this leftist, hardcore, communist, Marxist stuff. It's evil. Don't fall for all the Islamist stuff. It's evil. Don't, if you're young now and you're fed up with all the leftists, don't fall into the hands of the far right in terms of the real far right, the actual National Socialist, white supremacist nutters. And that's a mistake. I see a lot of young people doing it. If we're going to become radicalized, we go radicalized up towards God. We need to become spiritual warriors and fighters for the true God. That's where we go. We can't go, don't go along the left-right paradigm. Go up towards God. And the same way, don't go from religion to religion. Go up to God. It's a spiritual truth, not a belief. Other solutions is just prepare in your own life. So prepare your finances, try and invest in a bit of gold, maybe a bit of Bitcoin, although I've heard some recent things that it seems it's trying to be corrupted from within. So buy a property if you can, and just try and prepare the best way you can. And build a good network. If you have a lot of, regardless, you should always stick close to your family. If you have different beliefs, just stick close because you're going to need your family and a good network of friends or community of like-minded individuals. Even if it's just some good YouTubers or online influencers who you follow, who are wise and who you can form some form of a community or someone to look to give you good, wise advice. Such as myself, I have a group of really sensible YouTubers that I follow, and I don't pay attention to any of the extremists, any of the people who provide content to shock people and to monetize their content. No, I just want sensible people who are going to lead me to truth. And we can start building some. So, part of the arc is, for an example, instead of going to university, let's start, or even school, to be honest, if you have kids, I'd take them out of school. Let's start building our own homeschool communities. So it's not just everybody sat at home, but it can be a community of we can build centers where kids can go in and be educated in truth rather than away from our communist system. If you can't do that, we can always build after school clubs or morning spiritual churches where people can go and form a community of people who can be separated from the world. And for an example, if you go along to your church every Sunday and the priest is just saying the same old Christian nonsense, you're not really on the ark. If you can go to a community when you're following a real spiritual, enlightened, awake person who can provide the correct information on how we can protect ourselves, then you're in a right space. But, your local Christian pastor is not going to be telling you some of this stuff and a lot of this stuff I'm telling you. They're just going to say, yeah, send your kids to school, send them to university. They're going to say the same crap that the world does. But you need to learn some more spiritual stuff rather than dogmatic stuff. Okay, so that's the point of my video today. I think you pretty much get the idea of what I'm talking about. And as I say, I haven't done any videos because I think it's important as well to take some time to stop and reflect rather than just keep pushing out content or information. Sometimes it's good to learn, take a break. And that's what I have been doing. And I suggest a lot of you do the same. And don't get too involved on social media. I think YouTube is the best platform. All the X, Instagram, all that stuff. I don't have any of the other ones other than X. But if I spend a fair amount of time on X, it's literally full of absolute psycho people. And I think a lot of it is bots, to be honest. So step away from that. Just follow sensible people on YouTube, and that'll be much more better for your mental and spiritual health. And at some point, I'll provide some more details. I think ultimately educating people and bringing them onto the ark and waking them, bringing them to Christ, the truth of Christ and the Spirit, is it's the only way you're going to save yourself from the darkness of the world. But also, if enough of us get involved, which I'm hoping to do, although I don't have much hope that people will be interested, but to start something where people can join or infiltrate the church in terms of take over the church and make Christianity more mystic and about the stuff that I'm talking about. And if millions of people do the stuff that myself and others are speaking about, we'll overcome evil. But we won't overcome evil by following other evil ideologies or not being born again in Christ. So stay tuned. I'll provide more in time as and when I learn. Okay. For now, I hope everybody is well. God bless everybody. Stay well, stay positive, return to God, and everything is fine. There's nothing to fear. We should always remain positive. And while the world is in darkness, we were born for this hour and we should embrace it. And as I said, with God, there's no fear. So stay well, stay good. God bless everybody. Goodbye.